The Galactic Council chamber was built to silence fear, but tonight fear filled every wall and every seat. The gathered delegates shifted uneasily as they remembered why they were here. The chamber was vast, its ceiling carved from crystal and metal. Beams that glowed with the power of 10 suns, banners of 100 species hung overhead, but none gave comfort. Each banner reminded them of predators that had stalked their kind for ages, and tonight those predators were the subject of every whisper. A creature with scales like fire had once forced the Vren to abandon 3 worlds. A feathered serpent from the oceans of Kythera had nearly broken the will of its people. The Sora spoke of their Deathwings creatures that could see in darkness and slice prey into ribbons before a scream could escape. Each delegate was invited to speak of their terror, to share how they had survived against beasts that should not have been survived at all. Ambassador Trick of the Valyri stood tall, his shimmering robes trembling slightly as he recalled the fanged horrors that hunted his kind across the swamps of their birth world. He spoke of claws longer than a warrior's arm and venom that could melt bone. Yet his speech faltered when his black eyes glanced toward the single chair at the far end of the chamber. It was empty, and no one dared to look at it for long. Everyone knew whose place that was, and everyone tried to pretend it was not there. The humans were absent, though the council record spoke. Of their world, few had ever met one of their kind. Some believed they had vanished, others whispered they had chosen isolation. But all agreed on one thing. Earth was different. The predators of other worlds were dangerous. Yes, but Earth's predators belonged to a category no one dared describe openly. Even among themselves, archivist Relan of the Athari shuffled his many hands across ancient scrolls and digital tablets. His voice cracked as he asked the council why humanity was never summoned. To these discussions why Earth remained untouched in the archives, his words made the chamber grow colder. He began reading fragments, records smuggled from explorers who had set foot on the blue planet long ago. He told of lions with jaws strong, enough to crush bone, of wolves that hunted not alone but in coordinated packs, their loyalty to each other more frightening than their teeth. He spoke of serpents coiled in silence, striking faster than thought, of crocodiles waiting for days beneath water for prey to lower its guard. Each account brought murmurs, but when he mentioned sharks, vast hunters that ruled oceans larger than any galactic sea, the chamber erupted into alarm. The chairman of the council struck his gavel of light, demanding silence. He fixed his gaze on the archivist and asked if these predators still existed. The archivist replied yes, and more than that. He said there was another predator on Earth, one unlike any the council had ever imagined. The chamber leaned forward. As Relan spoke of the human species, he described them as fragile. At first, no claws, no fangs, no scales to shield them. Yet he warned that fragility was an illusion. Humans were clever, tireless, and worst of all, they were not content to survive against predators they hunted, predators themselves. A ripple of disbelief passed through the chamber. One delegate hissed that no prey could hunt its hunter. Another spat that the archivist lied. But Relan pressed on. He spoke of humans chasing prey across plains until the beast collapsed from exhaustion. He told how humans fashioned weapons from stone, wood, and fire, turning themselves into apex predators in every environment. He even dared to whisper that humans had taken wolves and turned them into allies, were beasts at their side. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. The empty chair seemed larger now, looming over the chamber as though a shadow of Earth itself had fallen inside. Every delegate shifted uncomfortably their own. Monsters suddenly felt smaller, their victories felt hollow. If what the archivist said was true, then all their stories of survival meant nothing for on Earth. The predators they feared would themselves be hunted. One young delegate of the Zir broke the silence, her voice trembling as she asked the question none dared to speak: if these humans were real, what would happen if they came here? What would they do if they saw us? The chamber fell still. None could answer, yet every eye returned to that empty chair, and deep within each alien heart, a new fear began to grow. Not fear of their old predators, but fear of the world that had created a species bold enough to hunt its own nightmares. Archivist Relan sat surrounded by his collection of records. While the council whispered in hushed tones, many of them wanted him silenced for daring to bring forbidden knowledge into the chamber. But the truth was already spreading like a wildfire that could not be contained. The council could feel it, the Empty chair of Earth was no longer just a seat. It was a looming presence, and Rellen's words had cracked open a door that none of them could close. The archivist lifted another record. His voice steady now, as if the weight of centuries gave him courage. He told them that Earth was not like other worlds where one or two predators rose above all others. Instead, Earth teemed with dangers on land, in the sea, and in the skies. He spoke of great cats with eyes that could pierce darkness and muscles that carried them faster than any prey. He told of birds with talons sharp enough to lift creatures screaming into the air, and of insects so venomous a single sting could bring death to a creature 10 times their size. The chamber shuddered with gasps and cries, but Raylan was relentless. He turned to a recording one smuggled by explorers who had dared to orbit the blue and green planet. Long ago, it showed herds of animals running across endless plains, not from one predator, but from many. Different hunters, each with their own strategy. Some sprinted in a flash, others struck from ambush. Still others chased without rest until the weakest fell behind. He explained that Earth was a world where no single predator ruled because humans, the strange hairless creatures of that world, had learned to stand against them all. At first, the delegates laughed, their nervous voices breaking the tension. These humans had no claws, no armored skin, no wings. How could such fragile beings live among monsters? But Rellan reminded them that their laughter had the same sound as prey before the predator strikes. He explained that humans carried something more dangerous than fangs or scales. They carried fire. They shaped tools sharper than talons. They worked together in ways no predator could match. They invented strategy, patience, and endurance, and they turned the very environment into a weapon. The council grew restless. The Zor demanded proof. The Kanar demanded to know if humans were still alive. But Rellan only smiled grimly. He told them that humans were more than alive. They were thriving, hidden perhaps, distant perhaps. But their legacy on Earth was undeniable. He shared a final passage from his scrolls, one written by an explorer who had watched humans from the safety of orbit. The words trembled across the chamber, describing how humans had hunted beasts 10 times their size with nothing but spears and fire, and how they had looked to the sky as though they belonged among the stars. A hush fell over the council as the meaning sank in. The delegates realized that if humans could survive a world filled with such predators, then what would they do if they ever stepped freely among other civilizations? The Zir delegate, who had spoken before, asked in a trembling voice whether the humans were a predator species themselves. Raylan's many eyes glowed with sorrow as he replied, "They are not merely predators. They are predators of predators." Panic swept the chamber. Delegates whispered to one another, wondering if humanity had already spread in secret, whether the empty chair was truly empty, or if the humans watched them. Even now, the Vren delegate shouted that this knowledge must be buried, that fear of humans would tear the council apart. But another delegate countered, saying that ignorance was far more dangerous if humans came uninvited. The galaxy would be unprepared better to understand them than to pretend they did not exist. At last the chairman struck, the gavel of light, calling for order. His voice steady, though his hands trembled, he decreed that the council would summon Earth. Humanity must speak for itself. The decision sent a chill across the chamber, for all knew what it meant. Their whispers had conjured the very species they feared, and now they would look upon it with their own eyes. As the meeting ended, the delegates left in silence, yet none could escape the shadow of Earth. Archivist Raylan remained in the chamber, gazing at the empty chair. He whispered to himself a line from the old records, "It is not the beasts of Earth you must fear. It is the ones who learn to hunt them." The archivist closed his scrolls, but the echo of his words lingered long after he departed. The day the human arrived, the chamber was already trembling with unease. The delegates had gathered earlier than usual, some driven by fear, others by curiosity. The empty chair was no longer empty. It had been prepared with banners of neutrality, no sigil, no crest, no sign of allegiance, as though the galaxy itself refused to claim responsibility for what was about to happen. Guards lined the walls, their weapons humming, yet even they glanced nervously toward the great entrance doors when they finally opened. Silence rippled across the chamber. The human stepped inside alone. He was tall, though not taller than most aliens. His skin showed no armor. His hands carried no claws. His stride was calm, steady. Measured, every movement spoke of control. Rather than fear, the delegates leaned forward expecting a monster, and seeing instead a creature of flesh and bone that looked unremarkable compared to their own armored hides or shimmering scales, but the ordinary shape of him unsettled them more than any beast could. His eyes moved across the chamber, and wherever they looked, the delegates felt as though he could see deeper than skin, as though he was measuring each of them not as equals but as prey. The chairman rose to greet him, his voice cracked, though he tried to sound firm. He welcomed the human to the council and asked his name. The man spoke with a steady tone. "My name is Elias, my people call me human. I have come because you summoned us at last, and because it is time the truth is spoken." His voice was not loud, but it carried across the chamber like thunder. Each delegate shifted uncomfortably, their bodies reacting to a presence they could not explain. Sir Delegate, who had trembled before, was the first to ask the question. "Why are you feared? Why do the records call your kind the predators of predators?" Elias smiled, though it was not a smile of joy. It was the kind of smile worn by one who remembers old battles. He answered by telling them stories not of conquest but of survival. He spoke of plains where his ancestors ran for hours chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. He described nights where they huddled by fire while wolves howled, in the darkness only to rise and drive those wolves away with sharpened sticks. He spoke of oceans where men dove into depths armed with nothing but courage to face sharks, and where some never returned, but others returned victorious. The chamber listened in frozen silence. The Canar delegate hissed that humans had no claws, no wings, no venom. So how did they defeat such horrors? Elias answered with patience. "We are not the fastest. We are not the strongest. We are not the fiercest. But we endure. Longer than any creature on our world, we think, we plan, and we work together. No predator on Earth could resist us for long, and those that could we studied until we learned how to strike back." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some delegates scoffed, others trembled. But Elias continued, his eyes unwavering. He told them that humans did not just fight to survive. They learned to turn predators into partners. He explained how wolves became dogs, allies who shared fire and food, how horses carried men across vast distances, how even falcons flew to hunt alongside them. Every predator they tamed became proof that humans were not merely part of the food chain, they were reshaping it. The chairman finally raised his voice, demanding to know the purpose of these stories. Elias's gaze turned to him, and for the first time his tone sharpened. "You fear your monsters because they rule you. We feared ours too, but we refused to remain prey. We hunted them until we learned how to stand above them all." The weight of his words crushed the chamber into silence. Many delegates bowed their heads, unable to meet his eyes. Others glared with anger, masking fear. The archivist who had first revealed the record simply nodded, his many hands folded in grim acknowledgement. The council had asked for truth, and now they were seeing it with their own eyes. Elias stood still, unarmed, unarmored. And yet every species in the chamber understood that they were not facing prey, and not even facing predator. They were facing something far more dangerous, a being that could look upon monsters and see only another challenge to overcome. The council chamber was restless after the humans' words. The delegates could no longer hide their fear behind whispers and scoffs. Some wanted him dismissed, others demanded answers. The chairman's gavel of light struck the air and silenced the rising tide of voices. His eyes fixed on Elias, and he asked a question that carried the weight of every being in the chamber. "You speak of endurance and cunning. You claim your people hunted predators themselves. Prove to us why we should believe you." The challenge spread across the hall like fire. Many nodded eagerly, believing at last they would see the human falter. Elias stood quietly, his gaze steady as if the weight of the galaxy upon him was nothing. He folded his hands behind his back and spoke, not with boast but with calm certainty. "If proof is what you want, then listen carefully, for I will not show you with claws or fangs, but with the stories of what we have done and how we have survived." The delegates leaned forward, some with suspicion, some with morbid curiosity. Elias began by describing the persistence hunt, a practice older than memory itself. He told how humans pursued Animals for hours across burning plains, never stopping, never relenting while their prey grew weaker with each breath, until exhaustion forced the beast to collapse where humans could strike the final blow. Not with speed, not with strength, but with relentless determination. The Zir delegate shivered, for no predator in her world hunted that way. Then Elias spoke of the oceans where humans swam into the territory of sharks armed only with spears. And courage, he described how men faced those great hunters and sometimes lost their lives but often returned triumphant, dragging the very rulers of the deep behind them. The chamber hissed with disbelief. Yet his steady tone made the images come alive until even the most hardened delegates shifted uncomfortably at the thought of fragile beings daring to face such monsters. The Kaner delegate demanded to know if humans were reckless fools, chasing death. Elias shook his head. Humans are not reckless. We are stubborn. We do not accept limits where others stop. We continue where others surrender. We rise again. That is why we endured while so many of our predators fell. Elias's stories did not end with defiance. He spoke of fire and stone and iron, of how humans shaped the bones of the earth into blades sharper than teeth, of how they turned wood into bows that could strike from a distance beyond the reach of any claw. He explained that when wolves hunted them, humans fought back until at last they realized wolves could be more than enemies, they could be companions. He told of how those predators were brought into their camps, how humans fed them and taught them until wolves became dogs, allies in war and in the hunt. The council erupted at this revelation, some calling it impossible, others whispering of sorcery. Elias raised his hand for silence, his eyes sweeping across the hall, and when he spoke again, his words struck deeper than weapons. You fear your predators because they rule your lives. We feared ours as well. But we learned not to hide. We learned to study them, to think as they thought, to move as they moved, until the day came when they were no longer our masters but our prey. The archivist Relan spoke up, his voice trembling yet certain. He told the council that the humans' words matched the forbidden records of Earth, that these stories were not myth, but history. Delegates exchanged nervous glances, for if both the records and the humans spoke the same truth, then denial was no longer safe. The chairman leaned forward, his voice slow and heavy. Then perhaps it is time for a test. Words are wind, but actions reveal truth. We will see if this human can truly prove what he claims. Elias nodded without hesitation, his expression calm as though he had expected nothing less. The chamber buzzed with tension as plans began to form. Whispers of trials and demonstrations filled the air. Alien predators raised in captivity would be brought forth to test the human they wanted, to see if this lone figure could face what their own kind feared. Elias stood in the center, unmoving and unafraid. The delegates studied him in silence, each wondering if they were witnessing arrogance or destiny. Thus the council prepared its test, and as the session ended, none could escape the thought that they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy. For if the human triumphed, their understanding of predators and prey would never be the same again. The test was set in the great arena built beneath the council chamber, a place where disputes were once settled through combat between champions, but never before had it been used to measure the worth of an entire species. The delegates filled the stands, their eyes sharp with expectation and dread below them. Guards prepared cages and barriers reinforced with the strongest alloys known across the stars. Within the cages, restless shapes shifted claws, scraped against metal wings, thrashed against bars, and eyes glowed with hunger. The predators of many worlds had been gathered here, each one considered an apex terror on its home planet, and all were to be unleashed upon a single human. Elias stood in the center of the arena, his figure small against the towering walls. He wore no armor and carried no weapon, but his face held no fear. The council murmured, some mocking his simplicity, others whispering that arrogance had led him here. Yet the archivist Relan leaned forward with grim fascination, certain that what would happen next was the very reason humanity had been whispered about for generations. The first cage opened with a roar, and a beast from the swamps of Valyri leapt forward, its body covered in jagged scales, its jaws wide enough to swallow a man. Whole it charged across the sand with terrifying speed, but Elias did not run instead. He studied the rhythm of its movement and sidestepped at the last instant, letting its momentum carry it past him. The beast spun confused, and Elias kicked dust into its eyes, blinding it for a crucial moment. The crowd gasped as the fragile human had not fought with brute force but with timing and cunning. The second cage opened, releasing a winged predator from the world of Sora, a creature with talons that could shred steel. It swooped down screaming, but Elias dropped flat against the sand, letting the wings pass above him in a blur. When it wheeled back for another strike, Elias scooped a stone from the ground and hurled it with perfect aim, striking the creature's eye. The predator shrieked and crashed against the barrier, writhing in pain. The council erupted in disbelief. A human unarmed had turned the arena itself into a weapon. One by one, the cages opened, each predator more fearsome than the last. Elias never fought them with strength. He used patience and misdirection. He waited for their mistakes, exploited their instincts, and forced them to exhaust themselves before striking with precise movements. Sometimes he drove them into each other. Sometimes he simply outlasted them, circling tirelessly until they collapsed. The delegates, who had come expecting to watch a human die, now leaned forward, their fear growing. With every passing moment, at last the final cage trembled open and silence fell across the stands. This was the beast chosen by the chairman himself, the Deathwing, a predator so feared that even the Sora who had evolved alongside it prayed to never see it in the wild. Its body was sleek, its eyes glowing with hunger, its wings wrapped tight around it like cloaks of shadow. When it unfolded them, the air itself seemed to shiver. The creature leapt forward, claws extended, ready to tear Elias apart. For the first time, Elias moved with more than patience. He surged forward, meeting the Deathwing head on. The delegates cried out in shock as the small human rolled beneath its first strike, grasped a broken shard of bone left from an earlier predator, and drove it into the Deathwing's side. The beast roared in fury, slashing wildly, but Elias clung to it, forcing the shard deeper, using the monster's thrashing against itself, until with one final cry, the Deathwing collapsed, its wings curling around it in defeat. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates screamed that the test was unfair. Others shouted that it was conclusive, but none could deny the truth. Elias had faced the predators of half a dozen worlds and triumphed not with brute force but with wit, endurance, and relentless will. He stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard blood and dust staining his body, yet his eyes were calm, unbroken, and unafraid. The chairman rose, his gavel trembling in his hand. He tried to speak, but his words faltered, for the council had asked for proof, and proof had been delivered. Archivist Raylan whispered to himself. Predators of predators, the phrase now living truth before them. Elias raised his head to the stands and spoke, his voice steady and carrying across the entire arena. You have seen your monsters, and you have seen me. Do you understand now? It is not that humans are the strongest or the fastest. It is that we do not stop until the hunt is finished. The delegates fell silent. As his words echoed through the hall, many shivered. Others bowed their heads in reluctant respect. The council had sought to test a human, but in doing so, they had tested themselves and found their nightmares smaller than the reality that now stood before them. The arena floor was still stained with dust and blood. When Elias was summoned once more to the chamber above the council, the delegates sat in silence, their eyes fixed on him no longer with ridicule, but with something far heavier. The fear had not faded but had deepened, now sharpened into respect and unease. The human stood alone in the center, his body scarred from the trials yet unbroken, his calm presence unsettled, even the fiercest among them. The chairman leaned forward and asked the question that lingered in every heart. What kind of world could create such a being? Elias took a long breath before speaking, his voice low but steady. Earth is not like your worlds. You think of predators as your greatest terror, but on Earth, predators are only one part of the struggle. My world itself is a predator. Storms hunt us with winds that can tear apart cities. The oceans rise up in waves that crush everything in their path. Mountains collapse with fire and ash that turn the skies black and freeze the sun. The land shakes and splits beneath our feet, swallowing whole settlements, and yet through all of this we endure. The delegates shifted uncomfortably, their scales and hides rippling in agitation. Elias did not pause. He told them that Earth was a world of constant trials. Venomous insects hid in shadows, waiting to strike. Unseen parasites, fed within the blood. Invisible plagues swept through villages. Without warning, the smallest creatures could kill as surely as the largest beasts, and often they did. He explained that humanity was shaped by this endless war, not against one predator, not against one storm, but against everything at once. The Zir delegate whispered in disbelief. "You call such a world home?" Elias nodded yes. "And not only did we survive it, we thrived in it. We built fires to tame the cold. We carved stone into shelter to defy the storms. We dug into the earth and drew strength from it. We crossed deserts where no other creature could endure, and we sailed oceans that tried to swallow us. With every wave we did not merely endure Earth, we claimed it." The archivist, Relan, leaned forward, his many eyes wide with a strange reverence. He had long suspected Earth was a death world, but to hear the human say it aloud sent chills across his limbs. He muttered so softly the council could barely hear him. "A world that shapes hunters of hunters." Elias's gaze swept across the chamber, and he answered, "Yes, you feared your predators, but our world taught us that fear is useless. Fear is only the first step. Endurance is what comes after. And when endurance is not enough, we learn, we adapt, we rise again and again until the world itself yields to us." The Canner delegate snarled in frustration, calling his words impossible. No species could endure such endless war without being broken. Elias turned his eyes upon him, and for the first time his tone carried a sharper edge. "We were broken many times, our bones shattered, our numbers cut by famine, by plague, by fire. Yet we rose from every ruin stronger than before. Every scar became a lesson. Every defeat a weapon that taught us how not to fall the next time." The council sat in silence, his words striking deeper than any blade. Many remembered their own histories, the times their species had nearly fallen, the predators that had haunted their ancestors, the storms that had forced migrations. Yet all of them knew their struggles were singular, their enemies limited. Elias had revealed that humans had faced every terror imaginable and had refused to die. The chairman tried to steady his voice, though it shook as he asked why humans had never come to claim the stars. Before Elias's eyes softened at last, and his voice grew quiet. "Perhaps because we did not need to until now. Perhaps because we were content to master the world that tried to kill us. Perhaps because when you survive long enough among monsters, you learn patience and you wait for the right moment." A silence spread that felt endless, each delegate caught in the weight of the human's truth. Even those who had mocked him before could no longer deny it. The human had revealed the final secret. Not only were his people predators of predators, they were the children of a planet that had forced them to be more relentless, more adaptive, and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever known. As the session drew to a close, many delegates whispered to themselves, some in dread, others in awe, but all with the same realization: the galaxy had feared its monsters, but those monsters would cower before what lived on Earth. And for the first time, the council understood that their fear had only just begun. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Not even the whispers of delegates from the farthest corners of the galaxy dared disturb the stillness. Elias stood at the center, his body bearing the marks of battles both seen and unseen. The scars on his arms and face told stories of endurance. The calm in his eyes spoke of confidence that no weapon or predator could shake. The delegates had seen humans fight before they had glimpsed their ships cut through asteroid storms and outmaneuver war fleets. But what they did not realize until now was that all of it came from a species forged by relentless trials. The chairman finally found his voice, though it trembled, and his tone was measured, yet edged with fear. "How can a species endure so much and not be broken?" Elias looked around at the assembly, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Because we are not broken, we are refined. Each challenge shaped us like steel forged in fire. We do not fear death, we study it. We do not flee from danger, we calculate it. We do not bow to predators, we become them, and when the universe tries to crush us, we learn to crush it in turn." The Zir ambassador shifted nervously, his claws scraping the floor. "A predator that fears nothing is dangerous, but a predator that fears everything, yet rises above it, is something the galaxy has never seen." Elias allowed a small smile to cross his face. "You misunderstand humans. We do not merely rise, we transform fear itself into strength. Every loss, every plague, every storm, every predator became a lesson, a weapon, a step forward. We are not just survivors, we are architects of survival. We create advantages from chaos, we make opportunity from annihilation. A murmur swept through the chamber, some delegates leaning forward, others recoiling. It was a mixture of awe and apprehension. Raylan, the archivist, spoke next, his voice quivering with excitement and fear. Elias, you are telling us that humans are not merely another species. They are a force the galaxy has underestimated for centuries. Yes, he replied bluntly. The galaxy has long assumed humans are fragile, that our laughter masks weakness, that our kindness hides cowardice. They assumed, because our wars are not always fought in conquest, but in endurance, that we are simple creatures, that we can be dominated. Yet they are wrong. The Kanar delegate growled, his many eyes narrowing. How can you claim to be so formidable when your worlds are scattered and your fleets limited? Elias answered with quiet authority, numbers mean nothing if the species behind them is forged by struggle. When your enemies fear storms that can erase planets, we do not count losses. We calculate possibilities and turn catastrophe into advantage. We do not rely on fleets to intimidate. We rely on the experience of surviving what no one else can. And when we move into the stars, we bring all of that with us. A ripple of unease spread through the council. Even those who had dismissed humans as a minor curiosity now felt the weight of his words. They began to understand that what lived on Earth was not simply a predator. It was a predator that had learned from every danger, every enemy, every failed attempt, and used it to grow stronger. Every human was a testament to survival, intelligence, adaptability, and unrelenting determination. A species that could endure everything the universe could throw at it, could not be bargained with, could not be reasoned with, and could not be defeated easily. The chairman leaned forward, his voice shaking with both fear and awe. So you are saying, humanity has finally decided to make itself known to the galaxy? Yes. Elias said the time has come. The galaxy has assumed that the humans of Earth are legends, that we are myths, that our planet is too harsh for any species to rise from. Yet, we are here, and we will not hide any longer. The galaxy will see that we are the children of a death world shaped by firestorms, predators, and chaos. We are predators of predators, and the universe will respect that. As the session ended, whispers filled the chamber, some delegates backing away from their consoles, others speaking urgently to allies across the stars. Everyone realized that humanity was no longer a story to tell, but a force to be reckoned with for the first time in millennia. The galaxy understood that their own fears had been small compared to the trials that had birthed the humans, and that the species they had once dismissed as simple survivors were in fact something far more dangerous, far more adaptive, far more unstoppable. Elias turned and left the chamber, the delegates watching in silence, knowing that their nightmares had just been made tangible, and that the legends of Earth were real, and far deadlier than anyone had imagined. The galaxy had feared its predators until it saw what truly lived on Earth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy had held its breath for centuries, believing that the predators it knew were the apex of fear, that the creatures who struck terror into the stars were unrivaled. But now the silence of the council was broken by the arrival of humans, not as myths, not as stories whispered in dark corners, but as reality. Moving with a calm confidence that radiated power and control, the halls of the greatest civilizations shook with the knowledge that everything they thought they knew about dominance and survival was incomplete, because the humans who stepped forward were the product of worlds where only the strongest endured, where every challenge was a lesson, and every predator a test of will. Ships unlike any seen before glided into orbit, their hulls gleaming with a design born from necessity and innovation. The humans on board did not wear the armor of intimidation, they carried the aura of inevitability, and the delegates watching could feel it in their cores. Every human that disembarked walked with purpose, their eyes scanning the council chambers, as if reading centuries of fear and expectation. Like an open book, they spoke not with threats, but with conviction, and every word they uttered carried the weight of survival honed to perfection. The ambassadors of the galaxy realized that humans did not need to fight to be feared. They commanded respect because they had survived what no other species could endure. The Zir shivered as one of the humans approached the podium. The creatures had been predators themselves, But the humans made them feel vulnerable and inadequate. The human's voice was calm, measured, and unwavering. It described the history of Earth not as conquest but as adaptation, a tale of survival through firestorms, predator attacks, and relentless challenges. Each moment of humanity's past became a testament to ingenuity, courage, and the capacity to turn adversity into advantage. The delegates began to understand that humans were not bound by fear or weakness, that their minds and bodies were instruments of relentless progress, and their presence alone was a warning that the era of underestimating humanity was over. The Kanar ambassador could barely meet the gaze of the human standing before him. It was not malice that made him recoil, but recognition that the legends had been true and far beyond imagination. He had thought the predators of the galaxy were terrifying, yet here stood a species that had mastered every threat that came its way, a species that had learned to weaponize pain, suffering, and danger into strength and strategy. He realized that the humans were not just apex survivors. They were apex predators whose intelligence was rivaled only by their adaptability and their capacity for endurance. As humans moved through the council, their presence demanded attention. Even the oldest and most powerful civilizations began to whisper among themselves, their strategies, their alliances, their centuries of confidence shaken, because the humans were proof that the galaxy had been living in illusions, that the predators it feared were not the pinnacle of evolution and survival, but merely participants in a greater design that Earth had perfected. Humans did not attack unless necessary. They did not fight for glory or conquest, but when pushed, they became unstoppable forces of nature, combining strategy, strength, and instinct into an unstoppable storm. The Council finally recognized the truth. The galaxy had assumed it knew its predators and its limits, yet it had never faced a species that had been tempered by every nightmare and emerged stronger and wiser. Each human was a living testament to the power of perseverance and adaptation. They carried the essence of a planet that had challenged everything in the universe and refused to yield. The whispers turned into murmurs of fear. The admiration was mixed with unease. Every species realized that the humans would not negotiate weakness or compromise their presence alone, reshaped alliances and hierarchies, and the universe would never see the same balance of power again. Elias stood at the front, looking over the delegates, his calm expression hiding the satisfaction of seeing the galaxy awaken to reality. They had assumed humans were legends. They had assumed they could be contained or ignored. Yet now the truth was undeniable. Humanity had arrived, fully formed, not as a threat to be measured, but as a force to be respected. A predator that taught even the fiercest of hunters that the rules of survival were written differently by those who endure everything and emerge unstoppable. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment it met Earth in its purest form, the species that no predator could break, the species that no catastrophe could diminish, the end.